Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be building yet another layout. This time it's going to be for my friend Canadian Behavior. He's wanted a layout for a while now, and he asked me if I could build one. So we already went ahead and actually set up this really nice table, which I think is going to be a good start. Since then, I've gone and I've purchased some various materials. We've got some track, a little bit of ground cover, and some cork. Now, I'm not going to be doing too much of the scenery. I'm just going to be adding some ballast and grass because he wants to add a lot of the buildings and stuff himself. However, he did also go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff, some of which will be attached right away, like this really cool Canadian National locomotive shed. He also went and bought some stuff like this Digitrax 52, which I think is going to be a great controller for this layout, and a whole bunch of different pieces of track, including some Pico switches and all sorts of other good stuff that we can use, which I think is really going to help to set this whole layout up. Now, he did have some specifications as to what he wanted out of this layout, but other than that, he pretty much said I could design it the way I wanted, so I've already gone ahead and put together a design which I'm pretty happy with. I'll quickly show you all kind of the thought process of putting it all together, and then we'll actually get to assembling this whole thing. Okay, so here's our track planning software. We're going to start off by just building a 22 radius curve, really nothing too complicated. Now, my friend Liam specified that he wanted 2 tracks on this layout, so we're going to do so. The track planning software, by the way, is Rail Modeler Pro. There are some other track planning softwares out there. There's also SCARM, and I think Atlas has their own track planning softwares, which work on Windows computers, so that's always an option for you. They all kind of roughly work the same way as far as I can tell. Anyways, we'll finish off this curve right here. We'll add this spur track here for a potential industry or something along those lines. Now, this layout is kind of an irregular size, so we're going to try to use the width to our advantage since it's not a very long layout. So we'll run this line right around the edge here, and this will just give us a bit of a better run up to the yard, so there can be a little bit more space here. And we'll also add on a secondary track to park some different cars and stuff. You could put a medium-sized train, and why not put a little bit of an offshoot just so that you have somewhere to park a locomotive. Just a little something extra. So now that we've got a design, I think we can start laying everything out. One thing I should point out is that track planning software can be very helpful because you can get all the dimensions correct and make sure it all fits together, but you don't need it. If you really want to, you can just draw something out, and most times you can make that happen. I've built 2 layouts that way, including the last one. It was all hand-drawn, and it seemed to work just fine. This is also not necessarily the rule, it's more of a guideline, because there are some things, you know, once you get this whole thing put together that might be desirable to change, like possibly adding another switch right here. Because this layout is sort of an unusual set of dimensions, whereas in, you know, it's almost a complete square as a 5x5, it makes it a little bit tricky for the amount of switches you can put on these straightaways, so that's why there's this line heading right here. But we'll lay it all out and just kind of see how it works, and if it's not desirable, we'll just change it. Planning can certainly go a very long way with building any layout, but one thing you don't want to do is get so caught up in the planning phase that you never build anything. I've seen that happen to some other people getting into the hobby, and you know, it's okay to build something and redo it if you really don't like it. I find you're definitely going to get a better feel for how something works once it's actually constructed. It's now a while later, and now that I've got the curves all together, I've realized that unfortunately these switches are not going to fit. I think we'll have to do a little bit of trimming on the ends here, which is really not ideal, but it's a lot better than shortening the curves or pushing them closer together, because if you do so and you try to run, let's say, a Dash 9 and an AC 4400, you're just going to end up with a Kinner SSP Smash Up Derby set, which is really what you don't want for your HO scale layout. So we'll do some adjustments here and see if we can make this all work. I think now the main goal is just going to be finding some straight pieces to connect the rest of all these switches and just little odds and ends like this together. Now Atlas does sell a variety of sizes in terms of straight track, but I find what's easier is just to get yourself a pair of track cutters. Almost every hobby shop sells these. These ones are made by Xeron, and they're actually made in the United States in Saco, Maine, which is a place where I vacation every year. It's kind of cool that they have a factory there, but anyways, you get yourself some track cutters, and then you can just take any piece of track, even flex track, and cut it down to the correct size, and it just tends to work out a little bit better. What I usually do is take a rough cut first, just to kind of get a better feel for how everything needs to line up, and then make a little bit more of a precise cut later on. And that right there looks about perfect. Well, so far I really like how all of this is lining up. I think the layout looks quite neat. Unfortunately, there's not going to be enough space on the end here to fit the locomotive shed. Earlier I kind of figured that if we removed this side building there would be enough space, but you can see right here, even if you line up the tracks on the edge, there's just not enough room to fit it in with the curve, and I really don't want to mess with this anymore. So what I figure we can do is move the shed over here, and on the track plan I already have a spur planned right here, so I figure what we'll do is we'll just run this down here, have it split into 2 tracks, and line up with the shed. And I think that this is going to look really cool. You could have, you know, 2 trains running on the main line, something shunting over here, and the locomotive shed in the background. Not a bad combination, so let's try it. Seen some real rail yards where they have an engine shed and they've got a third stall where a track used to go, and they've turned that into like a machining area. So I think we're just going to pretend that's the case with this one right here. Anyways, I think we'll move on to actually adding some roadbed to the whole thing and kind of shimming up this building. And then we can move on to ballasting and adding grass to the entire layout. I mentioned in my first layout video that I really like to use these little pins, and I find these are a very good way of just kind of holding the track in place while you get the cork and glue into place. Well, I think at this point things are starting to look pretty good if I do say so myself. There's still a lot that needs to be done. I need to check all the joints, solder everything up, add some wiring, wire up the controller, and then ballast and add some paint and different things. But just in terms of track work, at least it's all together now. Even shimmed up this building right here just using a little bit of foam board just so it'd be level with the rest of the layout. Still need to glue that down too, but I think I'm just going to quickly solder all the rails up off camera, and then I'll focus in on actually trying to add a controller or something to this thing and actually test it out for the first time. It's now a while later and I got all the rail joiners all soldered up, so I'm very happy with how those are looking. I also went ahead and added some stops to the layout, so hopefully we don't have any engines falling off like last time. And I also went ahead and wired up the controller. Got a couple wires which feed out under the layout, and then I actually went ahead and wired up all 5 sets of tracks, and this should make the connection very reliable because these switches are all isolated right here. So what can happen if you don't do this is if you're operating one engine in one section of the layout and a second one in another, if you go to throw one of the switches, you might end up shutting down part of the layout, which is pretty annoying. So this should make things very reliable, and these connections are way overrated. These are actually trailer wires. Not the prettiest thing, but a wise man once said, if the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy, and I think they'll do just that. Anyways, got our canary in the coal mine, and we'll set this thing up on the track, plug in the controller, and see how the layout does. Try to troubleshoot any problems if there are any. This is a analog locomotive, but most of the DCC engines are so valuable, I don't know if I want to throw them on here just yet after what happened in the last video where I was testing stuff out on a layout. So anyways, we'll go with that. I haven't worked with this controller before, so I don't really know what the function is. I'm not hearing anything from the engine, which is not good. This thing is so fancy, it actually says right there, track fault. Okay, well, let's go around and see if we can figure out what that is. I have my 2 suspects. One is this switch, one is that one. We can see right here that looks pretty well isolated. I think that might be our problem. Let's try bending those and see if it restores power. That's not at all how you're supposed to do that, by the way, but yeah, it's still blinking, so that's not the problem. Well, it's now the next day. I was up till about 1:30 last night trying to fix the short, and it turned out to be that switch. I don't know what somebody did to it, but unfortunately, basically the 2 rails leading up to the frog were soldered together. I don't know if that's for a particular wiring configuration or what the case is, but either way, it was not working, so I had to correct that. I had a real feeling it was that switch. It kind of sounded like the short was coming from there with the pulses in the track, and I don't know, just something about the way it looked told me that there was probably an issue with it. So anyways, got that all corrected now, so I think we can test out the layout for the first time. Can't tell you how happy I am to see that light working. So without further ado, let's see if this thing works. It's got a little bit of a different sound than some of the other controllers here, but happy to see it's getting power. Nice, okay, that's a good start. Yeah, so far so good. Transfers over without any issues. Alrighty, now let's take it out onto the main line. It's so great to actually see a locomotive operating on here for the first time. Whoop. Okay, so sounds to me like there was a brief short circuit and I think we hit a pin or something. Yeah. So it seems like there's still electrical faults with this switch. I think what's happening is it's making contact with this, so what I might do is just put a little bit of CA over this and try to insulate it. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's certainly worth trying. Anyways, let's see how the rest of the layout works here. And it does clear the shed, so that's awesome. Alright, well, I still got to do some more testing with some other locomotives, but I think just as a start, that's really not that bad. Alright, so I added some CA to that switch, so hopefully it will isolate that nicely, but in the meantime I think we'll do some scenery. We'll start by prepping the layout for the paint and grass. It's basically just going to be laying paper mache over things like this and that, just because these edges, if you try to put grass over them, are going to look quite unnatural, so by putting a little bit of paper, it's just going to balance this out, and I think make the layout look a lot better. Now I've just got some watered down school glue. I'll just dip pieces of deli paper in it and just lay it over the cracks, and it shouldn't be too much work. There's not a whole lot in this layout that really needs to be covered. I made a little bit too much of the water glue mix, but that's okay because we're going to be painting this soon, and sometimes I actually add a little bit of glue to the paint and already water it down a little bit just so that the grass can stick to it. So we're just going to dump this right in there, and nothing's going to go to waste. Optimally, you'd probably want to let this dry because as you paint, you might end up taking up some of the paper, but I think in this case, I'm just going to try to send it and hope for the best. Alright, looking good. Obviously got to clean up all the excess here, but I'm very happy with how that looks. You can kind of see how, as it soaked through, I just kind of kept adding on layers, and it's still kind of uneven, but this is a very natural look in my opinion. If you really want to make sure this stuff doesn't go anywhere though, follow it up with a layer of hairspray, but before you do so, definitely tape off your track with some masking tape or something, because if you get that stuff on your track, trying to clean it off is a nightmare. Ask me how I know. Anyways, I'm just going to put something over the track and then we'll give it a little spritz. Alright, got the track all covered. I know it's not very pretty, but at least we don't have to waste half a roll of tape. And it should get the job done, so I'll just spray a little bit of this stuff over the top layer. Alright, I removed all the cardboard and gave the track a quick cleaning, and so far the trick seems to have worked pretty well because both these locomotives are running. They didn't hesitate when I put them on the track, And moreover, the big boy apparently can run on the inside curves, which is impressive because part of them are made with 18 radius, which is pretty tight for a locomotive like that. So yeah, very impressive. Anyways, I think I'll make a few more small adjustments just based on how these perform if there's any problems. So far, the isolation trick with the CA is working out, so we'll just continue to monitor that. And otherwise, we'll continue on to actually ballasting all the track. Yeah, I think for a small layout this could lead to a lot of activity. So I think with everything all good operation-wise, we'll remove the locomotives from the layout and move on to ballasting it. Ballasting really just doesn't have to be that complicated. You just, sprinkle a healthy amount over the tops of the track, give it a little brush. And before long it will all just kind of start to come together. It's really important is that you make sure you don't get ballast in your switches and lock them up. Alright, well, I got all the ballast laid out. I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. It took a long time to do all this, but it's always worth it. Anyways, we're going to hit it up with a little bit of dish soap and water. If you do this by yourself, make sure you add a lot, because it's quite important that you break the surface tension before adding the glue. It's now the next day and it looks like everything's set up nicely overnight. The ballast is secure and so is the grass. So the only thing that's left to do now is just to clean the track and make sure there isn't any glue residue left over. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but this is quite an important step because power is just not going to flow through track if it has that residue left over. Another important thing to check out is all the switches because power has to flow through these, and if there's any glue on the inside or outside of the rail, it's definitely going to mess with that. So we'll go through all of those, and then after that I think we can actually run some full-size trains on this layout and see how it all works. Okay, with the track all cleaned up, I think we can go ahead and set up some full-size trains and really test this layout out, see if it works. Okay. Look at that. Well, folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm overall very happy with how this layout turned out. Everything seems to be operating as it should, and I think the fact it can accommodate a big boy steam locomotive is quite impressive. It certainly bodes well for anything else my buddy might want to run on here. I'm going to be very excited to see his reaction to this thing, because he has no idea what it looks like. He gave me some pointers as to wanting 2 tracks and a couple spurs, but other than that, he wanted this to be a complete surprise. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he thinks of all of this. Anyways, as always, if you want the track plan for this, send me an email, and I can either send you the JMRI file so that you can modify this in some track planning software, or I can just send you an image of the track plan and you can print that off as I did and follow along with it. This isn't going to be the last layout for this year. I want to build at least one more, which is going to be for my buddy Matthew's son. It's going to be sort of a compact layout, and then I want to build an ultra compact HO scale layout, which I think are going to be a couple of really fun projects. I also plan to build a budget layout. I think that might also be this year, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, until then, I just want to thank you all so much for watching.